Welcome back, everybody. We're here at the Dr. BeeWell studio. Today, we got an extra special treat for you all. Our guest today is Rebecca Simmons. Rebecca is a therapist who has her master's in clinical mental health counseling. And the real giddy up is that she's on track to become a psychedelic assisted therapist. That is something that is, she's actually a pioneer for that, which is absolutely incredible. We're gonna be talking about that today, which is so cool. But that's not all she is. She's a yogi. She's a friend. She's a mom. She's a really, really cool person, and I really can't wait to to get this conversation started. How's everything going today, Rebecca?
It's going great, Steve. Thanks for having me here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, happy to be here.
You know it. So something I've been wanting to try with my guests that I haven't been comfortable with.
Right.
That we talked about a little before the show is I've been wanting to try to do some Kundalini exercises, which is a mantra-based yoga. And so you said that maybe you try it with me today.
I would love that.
Okay.
Grounding, just bring us into the space and really set the tone for the conversation.
Yeah, giddy up. Okay. So I will, I guess I'll do it once on my own. And then when you hear me, you can kind of then follow along on the second one a little bit and see if we can kind of get in a vibe a little bit.
Let's try it.
We'll do it, 3 or 4 times and then go from there.
Okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
giddy up.
Yes.
Namo Guru Day Namo. So that's the little giddy up there. You ready? Namo Guru Day Namo Yeah, the light in me sees the light in you. Yeah.
Namaste.
Namaste. And I do wonder about the namaste. Some people have been there's a lot of yogis who don't say that, you know, who for some reason, it's like a greeting or something that, I think that sometimes they say like, what, us Westerners do that. And I know that's something that you're pretty passionate about is the Westernization of yoga.
Totally. To me, I think traditionally the way that I have learned yoga, namaste has always been a closing or a greeting at the end of a practice. And that does still feel very natural and true to me. However, what's different is I see that falling away and then this idea of clapping at the end of class a lot of the time, which is, that seems foreign. And I'm like, I haven't gotten to that point yet where I can take a class and then start clapping at the end of it.
Right.
But I do feel like, for me personally, namaste is like a reverence, a acknowledgement, a thank you. That's my clapping.
Yeah.
That's the way that I acknowledge the teacher or the instructor and what they provided. And so, yeah.
I love it. Well, we were just providing each other, getting into that vibrational frequency.
Right.
It's funny you say the clapping thing. So I take this each summer. I have the privilege of going down to Cape Cod and there's this wonderful yoga teacher there, and her name's Jennifer Norton, and is what she does is she teaches. It's called Chatham Lighthouse Beach Yoga. And so on, she calls it the most beautiful yoga studio in the world because it is. It's just surrounded. You're on the beach, and it's every morning. Throughout no matter what, throughout the whole 7 days a week. And she is originally a teacher from some type of yoga called Kripalu.
Yep.
Yeah, so Kripalu is really cool, and that's basically every time she does this, there's a practice in Kripalu that they do at the end that you kind of swing your arms around and swing them together, and then you jump up in the air, and afterwards, and it's really cool. And every time after, I've been to this class so many times, and it's a vacation place, so there's always different people coming, and there's some regulars, of course, but there's always different people there. It always ends up in spontaneous applause because people feel so good to be in their bodies and to be in the sun and it's like the perfect way to start a day on vacation, or a perfect day to start any day.
Yeah. Yeah, that reminds me of the breath of joy. Is that what it's called?
Oh my God, it's literally the breath of joy.
Yeah, the breath of joy. Yeah, you breathe in, up, arms up, out, in and out. Yeah,
yes,
the breath of joy.
That's what it's called, the breath of joy.
And everyone's joyous afterwards.
And everyone is joyous afterwards, and the way you're jumping up for joy, and a lot of these people, yoga I think is a great thing because it shows that you can. It shows that you can. Basically, no matter what, it's very low impact. So, my dad, my mom, somebody who's 70 years old, so the teacher, Jennifer, she says, when was the last time your feet left the ground? When was the last time your feet left the earth? Let's try this today. You're safe. You're in the sand. You're not going to fall. And you see these people who are older, or somebody might have a disability, and they're, leaping for joy and getting up in the air. And it's afterwards they're smiling, they're clapping. It's that's how I know how much power is in this.
Right. Yes. So much power. Yoga. I think yoga was my first, was my starting point, was my jumping off point into, really my life. I started yoga I started yoga, and again, it was very foreign at the time. So I have I'm a mom. I have teenagers, and when I was pregnant, it was prenatal yoga, and I went because at the time I was exercising, but I didn't know what I could do in my pregnancy and early, I was young at the time, and so I was like, prenatal yoga, yeah, that sounds like it should be safe and healthy, and I just never looked back, and that was about 18 years ago. So my practice has really evolved, and it's changed my life completely.
That's really cool. Now, with the prenatal yoga, was it how was it? Because from my experience, when I started yoga, that's what made me so empowered was I was seeing these unbelievable badass ladies, coming in 8.5 months pregnant. And at this point I'm doing hot yoga, and they're still coming into the hot room and doing it. And I'm just wow, these ladies are incredible. And they're telling me, it's, we're starting to, I wonder if it was different 18 years ago.
Oh yeah, I don't even know. For hot yoga 18 years ago, might have just been Bikram, the classic hot yoga Bikram.
Yep.
And so, these power classes and studios that exist today did not exist in that way then. So this was more of a community. It was more just a bunch of pregnant women. I mean, you had to be pregnant to be in the class, right? And actually, what it gave me is not only my yoga practice, but this incredible group of mothers who was also first-time moms at that time. And we're still friends to this day. We call ourselves the Yoga Mamas. That was just an organic, play group that we developed with our kids. So yeah, that was a really special time for me, finding yoga both for myself as an individual, but then also as a mom, and this little community of girlfriends that we created.
Yeah, that's really incredible, because that's what it is too. It really is a community, and you get. I was telling you before the show about my dancing story. And how I became myself through dance, and to the point where I can now dance in front of 100,000 people, and it's not an issue for me at all. But at first I was going to throw up. I was so nervous just dancing in front of 10 people. But the yoga community, during the pandemic, there's no dancing. All the clubs and bars and everything shut down, and I could dance by myself, but I get energy through people. So the yoga studio, we had one class called Friday Night Beats that I'd go to, and we would just rage,
Yeah, it was a static dance.
Exactly, static dance, exactly. And in my place, and I've since found out that like a lot of people, like that's how they see me, as like this guy who would come into the yoga studio who just didn't give a shit about what people thought about him, because he was like doing these dance moves to get himself ready and get, doing all these crazy moves. So it's like, it's really cool to see that community that was built from that. And it's a lot of the people who I've had on the show, a lot of people who I will have on the show is through that community that I built. It's really like it's so special, the yoga community. It's amazing.
Definitely. I think that's the bigger component to it, and something that we lack at times in this society, in this culture, is that sense of community, or, that real feeling of it. Just like neighbors and neighborhoods aren't quite the same as they used to be. So we now go places to create community versus just being in, our neighborhood or close together.
Right.
In that way.
Now that's like is that an okay thing? It'd be better, I think. This show is literally about that. It's about it's about helping the individual, the community, and society as a whole be well, and creating modalities and education for people to do that.
Yeah.
And I do think that if we could exist, like I go to a bowling league every week.
That's awesome.
It is awesome, and there's the thing about bowling league is it brings people from all different walks of life together. And it's like you have these you could be thinking one way all week, but then the doctor goes to bowling league with the plumber who's also there with the politician, and they're all talking, and they realize, oh, we're actually the same. We have the same problems. We have we're living the same life. Like we're not that different. Like that's what's huge about community, I think. And we have to search for that a lot more, I think, in this day and age than how it used to be.
Right. I mean, we live in a technological age, so information is just like at the palm of our hand, literally all the time. So generally, like, I guess if you think back before, we would have to commune to get that information or get that, however, information in and of itself isn't quite enough. What we actually desire is connection, and connection with nervous systems specifically. So being in the same space as another person hits differently than on the phone or the screen, or even, listening to something. It's just not the same as being around other people.
Yeah, I think that is like, you say that to me, and like that's why I'm doing the show. That's why I'm trying. That's my existence, is trying to help and show people that like getting together and having that connection, that human connection that we have. And even like when we're being together and then we're learning, like, we're getting together and then we're teaching each other something, like there's just so much benefit that can come from that. And when I'm the happiest, it's when I'm with other people. I feel so energized.
Totally.
After I do these shows, like I've been doing quite a few of these shows. And after I do these shows, I feel like, I go home at like 6, 7 o'clock, and it's like, oh man, my focus, because I was there connecting with a person, and only doing that for, you put on the headphones, you hear yourself with the mic, and it just brings in that focus even more, Yeah,
and I think to speak to that too, and is a couple of things. So first of all, you mentioned earlier is this idea of extrovert versus introvert.
Yeah.
So you are someone who gets that energy from being with other people, and that doesn't naturally come to everybody, right? So introverts might feel depleted after, engaging with others, or there are others who might have some anxiety. And so I'm speaking to the fact that when you went to go dance and you felt this nausea or this like complete, like, what is that? It didn't stop you though. You continued to show up and find ways to work with that, instead of preventing you from discovering now dance being like this incredible thing. But if you had stopped because you were feeling a little discomfort or nausea way back when you started, then you wouldn't have discovered that. And so for people to understand that it's going to feel uncomfortable at first if you're just seeking a community to begin with. You're going to be outside of that comfort zone of your own little space or whatever it is. It's just like finding ways for you personally to move through that discomfort, to stay consistent with showing up, because you don't know what's on the other side of that discomfort.
I'm going to like cry, because that is exactly what it is. And ladies and gentlemen, the only way is through. Like you have to deal with the discomfort. I never would have, if I didn't. I was literally running to the bathroom and throwing up. The most, physical vile symptom that you can have. And in the short term, I was vomiting, and I still went out there and said, I have to do this, because it makes, I know on the other side of it, I'm having these little glimpses of like what it makes me feel like, and I want more of that. And how do I get my paws on that?
Right.
And by pushing through.
Right. And the pushing through is always a very delicate dance because we want to be appreciative of the things that hold us back, like the resistance, because it has kept us safe for a really long time.
Yes.
So those parts of us that might have said, no, don't do this for fear of something bad happening, they could be, meaning well, right? So they mean well, but it doesn't necessarily mean you still have to listen to them. So you go gently towards that resistance, and you had the support there, which is another huge part when we're working through discomfort or resistance or that feeling of like, oh no, I don't think I can do this, is to look for others who might be able to like walk you through or talk to you, process, help you with some techniques you talked about. That's why we started the breathing thing.
Yes.
It's like, okay, what can support me through this discomfort, because I see that it's something I really want to experience, and I'm not going to let my own self or my own part of me block me or hold me back any longer.
Right. And it's exactly that. It's the it's the nervous system. It's the nervous system keeping us safe. Like, I actually have been starting to do some work that's pretty cool. Is like and this has just been given to me by therapists, not direct therapy that I've been doing, but just from different conversations from different therapists who have said that they're doing this type of work, and some stuff that I've read on my own. So I've been actually separating that person, that identity, that that person who kept me safe. Yeah, that part of me, exactly, the critic, the saboteur. And I thank him. I don't get mad at him. Right. I'm not mad at him because he kept me safe for so long, and he did. But I let him know that, like, the new Steve and the other part of me is actually in control now, and this is how we're going to do. I'm so grateful for you for keeping me safe and for for the perception of keeping me safe, because that's all it is. It's your body. Like, we're such incredible human beings. We're such an incredible species that physically, if one of our legs isn't working, we'll use our other leg 100% to make it work, and our brain won't really even know the difference. Our brain will just compensate and do it, even though there's all these other symptoms and side effects that might come from that. Yeah. But if that's of like a wound to the ego, that's how we process it, right? We just say, oh no, that can't be me, because I could have fear of people making fun of me, or fear of people judging me, or fear of the way that I see myself, whatever it is. But if I didn't break through that, we definitely wouldn't be here.
Right.
Yeah, 100%. We wouldn't be here, and I wouldn't be able to be the type of partner I am to my partner. I wouldn't be able to be the father that I am to my son. Yeah. All of these different things. The brother, the son to my parents, the brother to my siblings, the friend that I try to be, the CEO to my employees.
Totally.
I wouldn't be that type of person if it wasn't for that dance. I think it's so cool that we're talking about it.
Right. It's like, and then kind of promoting, like what I hear you saying is that this podcast the intention is for people to find their dance, right? To find what is that lights them up, even if it means they have to push through some resistance to get there. And in fact, when they do, which is what we talked about, that's when the real magic happens. It's what you learn about yourself along the way is the real information, or the real, I don't know, what you get from, it's not just the dancing itself, it's that how you now see yourself because of it, that you have a different view of yourself, that you learned this breath work, that you learned, because I remember you mentioning, like, you figured out it was breathing that was going to get you through, and then your partner was like, yeah, I've been trying to tell you that for so long, and it's like, yeah, but when you figure it out on your own, you have embody, a lot of it is you embody that experience for yourself, you learn at such a greater rate or level than if someone's telling you and just giving you information. So it's all about this experience that ignites like the learning.
Yeah, you need the experience, like 1,000%. She was talking to me about yoga for 5 years, and I actually knew in my head, like, I knew I was going to love it. I knew that I would be this person who, and I also wasn't embarrassed to go. Like, at this point, I was, I was a lot heavier. I was like 280 pounds. I was bigger. So, but I never actually like really cared about, like, subconsciously, I probably definitely did, likely, but I didn't, like, that wasn't what was keeping me away from it. It was like almost just like, I was so sad. I was so depressed, subconsciously, and I was starting to get better. I didn't think that I could allow myself to feel this good. I didn't think that it was okay to feel this good. Yeah. And now that's all I want to do is feel as good as I can every single day. And that's an okay thing. Also knowing that even when days aren't great, it's just perspective. It's just perspective, and I can change the way that I'm feeling about that. And, I don't even have to have expectation on it as well. I don't need to be happy. I don't, it's just something that comes through me. Right. And I get to appreciate it.
Right, exactly. Because I think we might get into a trap of the happiness trap and just trying to say, I like the positive feelings. Let's just stay with all those. But all these negative ones, I don't want to deal with those. But I think that kind of it's almost like when you talked about that part of you, that critic part of you, when we resist that part, it's denying something versus accepting it and allowing all of it to show up. So that full spectrum of emotions and things. So whether it's happiness or sadness or grief or loss or whatever we're experiencing, to be able to allow it, just let it all through and in. And that takes some time to really believe or know to be true, because it's well, intellectually, I just want to feel good. I just want to feel happy. Why would I want, it's not necessarily a wanting, it's an is. It just is. Sometimes life is not always happy, and that's okay too. And that's okay too.
Cool. Yeah, I think that speaking to that is really cool, because I know now I'm not always happy when I'm going to the gym or when I'm going to a yoga class or stuff like that, but I'm able to know now, because I've put in the work and I've gone through it, that I know that afterwards there's only one way that I'm gonna feel, and it's gonna be better than I felt beforehand. Right. I'm gonna be happier. Yeah. And so I always try to keep that in the forefront of my mind, because the critic, the saboteur, he's still there, and they're always going to be there, because guess what? Your body thinks that you wake up and you say, oh man, you only got 5 hours of sleep last night. And the critic's saying, dude, you need sleep. You need some sleep. That's what you need. It's fine. Just get the sleep, do that. Then the other part of my body says, no, man, we're good. If you go to the class today, you wake up, you do the thing, then you're gonna feel better tonight, and you're actually gonna get better sleep, on the previous night. You will catch up. Don't overthink it. Don't worry about it. The critic tries to just to keep you there and tries to keep you in that space, which is okay, right? Because change is so hard. Right. But now have you seen a lot of these changes in your practice with people? Going through, is this some of the work that? This
is exactly kind of what I do. Just kind of listening, and I like to take. I'm always at the edge, right? So I show up with a lot of acceptance and a lot of just meeting people where they're at, right? I think I come from a standpoint that most of us, if we talk about some of the things that we could use or need outside of community. And what community offers is this idea of being seen, heard, witnessed, and really present with another human being. And so that's how I show up first. So whatever is there, I'm here for, and that is something through modeling or through being with a regulated nervous system, I hope to help a client achieve that within themselves, right?
Cool. Yeah, so even by... You're saying that not only is the benefit coming from, the work that you guys are going to be doing together, but it's beautiful. It all comes back to it. Not only is the work going to be done that you guys are going to do together, but by being yourself and by being the best version of yourself, that's the benefit that your patient is going to get.
Yeah, and so that's a client-centered approach. So that's, there's 3 qualities. It's unconditional positive regard, genuine, and authenticity. So that particular modality of therapy is really about Rebecca being in the room, and not being just a therapist, right? That I'm a human being too, and I'm a person too. And so that is felt by other people, right? So nobody necessarily wants to go into a therapy session and have someone who knows everything and feels like they're being analyzed on every, word that they say. I mean, I don't think so. Maybe some people do. Who knows? But from this lens, there's more to it. But there's a belief that you have the answers for yourself. So I don't have those answers for you. Maybe I reflect back what you're telling me in such a way that you're able to process that and see something differently. And again, showing up with this unconditional positive regard. There are no bad parts. There's nothing about you that needs to be fixed or changed or healed, that we will work through some behaviors and some neural pathways, but those are even there for a good reason, So it's not like I deem them as wrong.
Let's figure out why those are there and then assess that. And then maybe they have to change or maybe they don't. Maybe they've been there to protect you and to help you live this successful life based on the foundation you have.
Absolutely. So the brain is wired for survival. So it's 100% everything that we're doing is to survive. And there's we can't fault that. And so now if we get to a point where those behaviors or patterns or the way that the brain is wired is no longer serving us. I think that's, one of those sayings. But if it's just not working and it's now creating more difficulties, well, okay, let's take a look at that. But before we do, let's look at the fact that it's wired like that for a good reason. If we say, oh, wow, that's why it's been doing that. And so sometimes I'll bring in attachment theory, or sometimes, that's when the childhood stuff might come in, because it helps us look at why our brain might be wired to do certain things to keep us safe.
And so attachment theory is what we have attachments to, because when we're kids and stuff that we believe that's foundationally about us.
Yeah.
Just explain attachment theory a little bit more for us.
Right. So again, very simple, and going back to that sense that we are wired for belonging, connection, community, that feeling of safety within somebody else. So as an infant or a newborn, we need our caregiver to survive, literally, right?
Yes.
So if we don't have our caregiver, then we won't survive.
Yes.
And because of the way the brain is wired for survival as well as connection and belonging, both of those things are how we attach to our caregiver. So how we relate to the person that we depend on the most. And depending on the caregiver's ability to regulate their own nervous system and what they're presenting with to this infant is how the infant will organize its brain. So if there's some misattunements or even really overt abuse or things either on all the spectrums, that's going to indicate to the infant or to the person eventually how they view the world. It becomes their outlook, essentially.
Yeah, this is so so spot on. And it makes so much sense. That I have a child now. 6 months, and everything I'm his everything, and everything that I model for him. He needs me to survive. We're an incredible species, but that's one thing about us that is we can't raise ourselves. Some species they have their babies and then the babies are on their own and they figure it out.
Right.
That is not us. We're taking care of these children up until they're 18.
Right.
And probably even more so. My parents are still taking care of me.
Absolutely.
And it's really tough, I think, because people, me, everyone else, a lot of people get caught up on their attachments, because it's this happened this way, and I am this way because this way, and I can't change, and this way, and it's the way that I think of that is you said it already. My parents, they were doing the best that they could with what they had. So they had something modeled to them by their parents, who had something modeled to them by their parents, and it's our job as now parents is to try to make that a little bit better than the previous generation, so that we can heal and there can be that space where people can get better and can grow. And I'm grateful for my parents, because even though there was trauma and all that stuff, they were able to I'm here and I can appreciate them. And I don't think everybody always feels that way about their parents. I think they sometimes have negative feelings about it, because they're like, oh, my dad didn't do this, or this person got that, or and I obviously have done this in my life, and this is how I've learned. But the letting that all go and seeing them as a person is only going to help you. Right.
And I heard once that it's this idea of when you look back on your childhood, you take a both objective and subjective stance, and that helps you to kind of create and narrate the past a little more total, so that it's not just your subjective reality or experience where they did this to me and this happened to me, but you also take in that objective stance where they were doing the best they could, and there's no fault or blame to your experience or what you went through, because they can't do, you can only do with what you know, right? So even for me, knowing that, being a mom for this long, it's like, I think I tried to learn from the mistakes of my the parents that I had. And that doesn't mean I'm not making mistakes, right? So that does not mean that my kids aren't going to feel some sort of way about how I mommed and how I am momming. And so what I do more than like anything is I repair. So I try to make repairs with my kids. So when that I might have gone unconscious, or I might not have shown up in like I might have misattuned with them for whatever reason, is I try to always come back to an open dialogue or an open conversation and be like, hey, I'm human too, and I'm sorry, and I don't always get it right. And, please tell me, let me know if there's something that I am missing, because I'm going to miss some things.
Yeah, I love that. I have, I'm a big following of mine, a person who's helped me out a lot in my life. She's just an influencer. She doesn't know who I am, but I've read her books. Her name's Dr. Nicole LaPera. She's the holistic psychologist.
Oh yeah. Of course, everyone she's huge.
She's huge now. Yeah, I think so. Like she's, the way that she, the way that she talks about that is like 50% parenting. Like, we're never, none of us are going to get it right. Like, none of us are going to get it right. We're all human beings. We all have our own shit. We all have our own trauma, and we're going to put that on our kids. The giddy up is to have that open dialogue and to have that, you said repairs. I think that's the coolest way to say it, is repairs. And I know that, like, my dad, he does this stuff now, which is incredible to see this growth in an older person. Like, that's incredible. But it's not something that was modeled to me, back then. It was, he was angry, and that was the case, and that's what happened, and then we moved on. And then things were fine. Things were fine afterwards. He was great, and it was back to being my dad. But there was never like, hey, dude, my bad. I probably shouldn't have fucking lost my shit. But he does that now. So it's incredible to see that growth and to see that. It's like, it makes me so like proud and so like, hey, I can do that too. I can keep getting better. Like my dad's 62 years old and he's still improving. And, I'm 32. I can definitely keep getting better and be the best possible parent to my child for sure.
Right. Absolutely. I think there's a never ending growth curve, right? So we don't want to kind of miss where we are, obviously, right? So there's always that delicate balance of like being really present and good with where you're at, and knowing that there's some space for improvement, right? There's always a little bit that we can bring in and decide for ourselves to become, right? And that's inspiring. I feel. I think it makes like the life journey a little more enticing to know that it's not going to be so stagnant or just like set and rigid, and that there's expansion. And that's sort of what has, maybe this segues into a little bit of like the psychedelic space. And like, because when I think of expansion, I think of expansion of consciousness, or like, kind of opening your mind in those ways. And that's something that I've been passionate about in the past few years.
Yeah, let's definitely start to get into that. Let's just give the listeners, like, your and me too, like we've talked about it before, but your background on what led you to here, because you were you're doing you said it kind of started with yoga, and then you started getting into counseling and doing that, and so lead us what brought, because this you said is a long journey. I don't got, like, listeners, I don't think that there's a person that I've that I've spoken with that's on the same path for as long as Rebecca has been on it, in terms of trying to become this, the psychedelic assisted therapist. Like, this has been her plan. That's why she became a therapist.
Right. It's the only reason.
Yeah. It's like, so let's giddy up. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Sure. So for me, right, it's interesting to always like kind of tell your story. So I'll think about it. Not unexpected, right, as most things are, and especially I think when it comes to me, I wasn't born with that, like, I know what I'm going to be, right? Like, 6 years old, what are you going to be? I'm going to be a nurse. I'm going to be this. I'm going to be a teacher. I did not know. And so I was married for years and years to my older children's father, and I worked for his business, and then we got divorced in about 2012, and I kind of really was out on my own for the first time, because we were very young. I was very young when I married him, and I was like, okay, this is my time. I was about 30, 32. And I was like, I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to figure out what I want to be. And yoga seemed to be the right answer at that time. And I started to teach as a profession.
Okay,
so
awesome.
I was a yoga teacher for a long time.
Okay.
But it was not like exactly what I wanted to be doing. I still was like trying to figure that out.
Just to scratch the surface of the uncomfortability in your experience and where you wanted to go.
Right. But I had this like awakening and epiphany around in the yoga practice, like a lot of meditation, a lot of body, spirit, all those things happening. And in about the end of 2014, I would say, a friend through the yoga community, he was moving and needed a place to stay. And I had just finished this room in my basement. And I was like, yeah, come stay with me. That's totally cool. It'll be fun. He was there for quite some, maybe 6-7 months. And so early 2015, he's like, hey, can my girlfriend come stay with me? And I'm like, yeah, sure. That'll be great. Bring her in. And she ends up being one of my dearest friends to this day. And at the time, so this is early 2015, she had been down in the jungle in Peru and had been working very close with grandmother ayahuasca, and I didn't know what that was at all. Like,
no clue.
No clue.
Wow.
No clue.
Okay.
Like, this
cool.
is like no clue what
Just
it was.
this new person who's being brought into your life,
Yeah.
through a kind of, funny circumstance, kind of
even
a little
that
giddy
was,
up.
yeah, a little random, right?
Yeah.
And so I was open enough to see, this is interesting. And, we started connecting and talking more. And, she was going to have a birthday actually in April, and she was going to go to ceremony for the birthday. And we were going to have a group of us go down there, including her boyfriend, my friend, and a couple of other of us. And then for other reasons, they weren't able to go. So it was just me and her. And we drove down to New York City, in Brooklyn, New York. And I sat with ayahuasca and grandmother in this brownstone for the first time in April of 2015. And it was incredible. And it was just such a unique and beautiful and confusing and wonderful experience. And I really didn't touch the medicine for 3 years after that.
I love it. And I know that that's something that we're going to get into is the integration piece, because that is the biggest piece of it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, have you done psychedelics before?
Have I? And so I didn't really experiment with drugs like when you normally would experiment with psychedelics and maybe I tried LSD once in college, if that, not really. Psilocybin mushrooms in my adult life, actually, maybe once prior to that too.
Wow. Okay. And then so you just had this. This is what we're talking about. This is the medicine. You had this experience, and then for 3 years you didn't touch the medicine again.
Yeah.
Post that. Okay. So let's talk about the journey that led you on.
Right. So after I sat with the medicine, and that's something we call it. I call it. In that community,
calling it the medicine or sitting with.
Yeah, sitting.
Sitting with.
Sat or sitting. I don't know. I just realized recently that some people don't say that or don't know what I meant by it.
Yeah. So everybody what Rebecca's saying is that she went to an ayahuasca ceremony, and is what people call it in the space is they're sitting with it. I sat with ayahuasca, which is really cool. It's kind of showing that it actually goes back to show most drugs are going to work direct biomedical effects on a passive person, right? That's how drugs work. That's what my background is, pharmacy. It's like a passive person. We have this biomedical, interaction that's coming in that's going to change the person. Not being passive about it and going in with intention and, thinking that's what sitting with it is. That's what, from my opinion, is because you're not just taking this drug, you're going to have an experience with this thing, which is also you're having the experience with yourself. Mm-hmm. So you need to be, prepared for that.
Yeah. I when I reflect back, I feel so really lucky if, we believe in that thing, but because I would not have sat with it if not for the circumstances exactly as they were. I was a single mom, I had never really done drugs before, and that's what I saw it as, and I was worried about a whole bunch of self-concepts and things like that. I felt so safe. That's one thing I really, not that I worry about it, but I want it to be very clear that there's a lot of different ways to sit with this medicine. And I feel like it was done really well, especially at that time. Being with my friend who was living with me, we did a dieta. Beforehand, so you have to prepare for the ceremony, specifically with ayahuasca, where you start to restrict some certain things in your diet and in your system.
That's what the dieta is.
Yeah, that's one of the dietas, exactly. You can
for people listening, that means like not drinking alcohol.
Yeah.
Caffeine,
red meat, sugar.
Yep,
salt.
Sugar. Yeah, exactly.
And sex.
So I didn't know that. Okay,
Yeah.
cool. So it's like, is it 60 days, 90 days? What's 30 days?
Not even. I think it's just a few weeks before from what I haven't sat in a long time, but no, it's just a few weeks before.
That's the protocol that you were doing that time. They just said a few weeks. No sex, no salt, no sugar.
Right. So at least 2 weeks prior. And then obviously there's some counterindicators as far as medications. So you definitely, depending on the medications that you might be taking, pharmaceuticals, that you cannot. That detox might be longer depending on what it is. So.
Yeah, it's the medicine, it's a MAO inhibitor, an MAO inhibitor. So like that can be real, there's certain drugs that can fuck with for sure. It's like when you're learning in pharmacy school, that's the class of drugs where you get to a slide and you're like, oh, there's some drug interactions for this one. Most drugs are pretty benign in terms of like interactions with each other. But then some are really not benign and MAOs can be that way. So you definitely, if you're taking any medication, if you're going to do this, do it with somebody who, a person who's 100% asking you about all the medications that you're taking and is super, understanding of the processes and of the, the mechanism actions of the drugs involved and the drugs that you're taking.
Yeah. And this is part of the preparation, right? So this is, like you were saying, like the intention going in. They say that once you kind of get the call and even book the sitting where you're going to sit, it's like the medicine starts to work. Right. So you might already feel that the medicine is in the field, right? It's around you. Yep. And that can show up when you're starting to say, what, I can't have coffee? What do you mean I can't have coffee? And these attachments, right? These like pseudo addictions are like there's a light being shined on it. And so that's where the medicine starts to work, is really through the preparation of, you're saying, I want to respect the tradition and the way that this medicine is being given. And so if that means I have to give up some of my things in order to do that, then I'm willing to do that. And if resistance comes in, well, what's that about? What is that? Yeah,
I think that's like really cool. It's back to, just the whole idea that if, you're not able to, that the only way is through. So if you think you're ready to sit with ayahuasca, and then you go to, to not do caffeine or to not eat bad food or to not have sex, and you can't do those things, that's a reassessment. You may not be ready.
And it will show, and so then say you bypass the recommendations, right? The traditions, and you eat the caffeine, drink the caffeine, eat the food, have the sex, and then you sit anyway. Oh, good luck.
Okay, cool. You're gonna
possibly
learn. Right, possibly right. Well, that's what's great. Well, that's what's great about it. That's what's great about it is it's trying to teach you something, and it's this experience that you're having. It's not completely relying on the passive patient. Like you're completely involved in this, and we don't take agency into our health. We don't. A lot of the times we're passive people. So we just say, okay, I'm going to go here, and this person's going to give me a drug, and it's going to make me feel better. Not, I need to giddy up. I need to wake up every morning at 5, and I need to make sure that I'm going to the gym and make sure that I'm getting enough water and make sure that I'm preparing that when I am ready to sit with ayahuasca, I'm ready to do that. Like we need to take back control of our own health. And that's one of my biggest messages because I was going to die. I was so sick, so depressed, all this stuff that I was going on in my life. And instead I'm here because I went through it. And I had all this beautiful support as well to help me get through.
Right, exactly. So I think it goes into like that belief system, right? What you believe about yourself, which is tricky because I hold the belief that, at the core of who we are is worthy and deserving. It's just sometimes those traumas or those attachment wounds or things like that kind of muck it up. And so we distort that belief to saying like, I need somebody else to take care of this for me because I can't do it. I don't know about it. And it's just, getting through that it's almost like a barrier, right? Getting through all of that to come back to the truth, which is always there. And that's just that you are capable and powerful and deserving of that, whatever it is that you really desire. So that experience was incredible that weekend. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Well, do you mind sharing about it a little bit?
Yeah. I mean, I think for me overall, it was very, very deep, very unexpected. I can feel myself like looking off into the distance, like bringing up memories and like images. With the way that I worked with it, it was the Shipibo tradition. And so, they sing the Ikaros and there's a shaman there who's singing. And then in that space at that time, and often when I've sat after, others in the space would sing and bring in their music.
Yeah.
And it's been incredible.
Vibrational frequency is a real thing. So like with me, with Kundalini, the practice that we started this episode with, at the end of these practices, you would do something called a gong bath. Mm-hmm. And you'll have somebody come in who's practiced and knows how to play the gong. And I could literally feel like I have really tight hips, and my hips, and that's kind of what I was starting to discover through yoga. It was like, okay, when I would sit there after doing Kundalini class and they would play the gong, I could feel my hips. I could feel the right parts of my body tightening, the parts of my body that needed to loosen and needed to relax were doing that, and my hips would be like brought forward, and it was by the sound. Mm-hmm. It's like, this is crazy. It's that actually brought me to a point where I'm now introducing sound into my business as much as possible.
Totally.
It's like with the Dr. BeeWell stuff, we have a line of products where we're, experimenting all the time with stuff like that.
Well, some would say that this whole universe is frequency and vibration.
Right, yes.
That nothing is stagnant. There is technically, at the fundamental, there's no matter. Matter is just, moving particles, and they're just going so fast. So it's really important when we think about just the space that we're in. And, that goes to this idea of these medicines and they can be like sacraments because they bring us to a mystical or spiritual part of ourselves. And that's an important piece to this whole thing, and maybe potentially something else in this culture aside from community and acceptance and belonging that we might be missing is that connection to spirit and to our spiritual aspects of ourselves. And this path may help to promote that too.
Yeah, I think that's what's beautiful about it is I think that it's all within us. And I think that we've just created so many barriers, and some of these barriers are, stretched out across generations. Mm. So, like, to get through them, we need a little bit of help.
That's right.
But it's all within us,
right? Which
is really beautiful.
Yeah, and the help and like the allies are like the plants or other people. It's just like experiential, so it's not because we're lacking anything. It's just because we get to have that experience, we get to go on the experience back to ourselves because potentially, right? So we come into this incarnate as humans, but we forget, right? So we forget the essence and the purity of who we are at some core level. And then if we decide to go on this heroic journey, the whole experience of the human life is remembrance and like coming back to that place of unity within, which was never missing. It's just forgetting.
Yeah. We're always forgetting, like, as a society, like I think that's another thing of this, like the safety bit, like to keep us safe, the nervous systems and stuff. They try to just, our bodies easy forget, like women with childbirth, for instance, it's like they have these, trauma, very, very tough situations sometimes. And to the point where normally you'd think, I'm never going to go through that again. But the body, says, no, that's a giddy up. We're going to do it again, and we're ready. And a couple of weeks later, the ladies are like, okay, I can do this again. When the body is ready.
Right. I mean, there's definitely more there's a lot of forgetting. Some is good
Yeah,
for sure.
right.
And some is healthy and needed and necessary. I don't think we're in a place where we could, so like the brain is always filtering out so much information. I think it has to, and that's to me like a level of forgetting, because if we were too perceptive to every single thing that was going on in the moment, it's just like, it would be sensory overload.
Yeah.
We can't do that yet. So with the spiritual aspect of remembering and forgetting, and this is like, I appreciate people's spiritual beliefs in general. So it's like, this is just mine, which is only a belief, right? And that's just that we all are spiritual beings, like having this human experience. And so that could even mean that you're an atheist and you don't believe that. And I'd be like, yes, that makes sense, right? And so no matter what the Constitution is, from my perspective, it's still a spiritual being or person. And that's why I think it's important to explore your consciousness, because it reveals a spiritual component.
Yeah, we're all energy. It's, and that type of that energy. Your energy has done so many things. Within like your lifetimes, or how long ever this specific energy that's within you now has been here, and that's been forever. So yeah, just learning how to to be comfortable with that, and knowing that like for me, that's how I see it too. We're spiritual beings having a human experience for sure.
Yeah. So DMT, the compound, one of the compounds in ayahuasca is known as the spirit molecule.
Okay. Yeah. Spirit. And that's probably because it's a dissociative, and it's allowing you to kind of get away from that self.
Right. So it shuts down the default mode network, or the ego, that part of the brain that's like more on, the conscious waking state. And it shuts that down. That's why sometimes they call it the ego death.
Yes.
Yeah. And then it turns on all these different parts of the brain. And that's where they say, if we're thinking of neuroscience, right, outside of the spiritual, but that's where the mystical experiences can come from, because, your regular sensory system and the way that we normally operate is no longer operating.
Right. And, so everyone understands. So ayahuasca is made up of two plants, there's, DMT, and then what I said before, the MAO inhibitor. So normally when people will do DMT, and I've done DMT one time in my life when I was in college. And, we smoked it, and it just made everything go. Another thing is, I had no intention. Let's get fucked up, like that's what we were, we were doing. Right. College. Right. But it's funny because it was I remember this experience vividly, it's like I sat there, I kind of got out of myself a little bit, and I saw myself sink into the chair. Things became very yellow. But then I became very, right afterwards, people had a bad experience. My friend had a bad experience, and I was able to be present, right away, because I was always the person who's helping and being there for people. I was a little, maybe a little bit more mature, or had more experience in life, whatever it was. I was just, kind of like the dad, So I was able to be there for him, right away. And, through that, even though we had no idea we're two college kids, we had this unbelievable, real conversation, right afterwards. That was great. But what I'm getting at is that DMT is normally something that, the half-life is so quick, it's going to be out of your system immediately.
That's right.
And so the great thing about ayahuasca and the MAO inhibitor is that when you put that drug in there, the enzyme that's inhibiting it, it's not, allowing the enzyme to be cleaved off. That is what's keeping the DMT continuously active in your body and allowing you to have the experience. Yeah,
because it's maybe at least 6 hours, maybe 7, 8.
Wow.
So it's a long night, and it's traditionally done at night. So other substances like maybe peyote, they are done during the day, right? So, or different times. It depends on the tradition, but specifically ayahuasca, at least the tradition I've worked with, and I think what I've heard so far is that, you don't drink until about, 9 o'clock at night.
Wow. Okay. This is really cool. And I love having this conversation with you, because I'm a person who's very into the psychedelics in terms of knowing them as medicine and trying to create education around them. But I've never sat with ayahuasca, and I'm ready. I'm definitely ready to do that, to have that, that experience to help for intention to help me clarify on this journey. There's so much in front of me right now, and it's all beautiful. And I want to just be completely focused on what that is. And I may not know, I actually, I shouldn't say that, because I do know. I just, I can't wait to have that experience to help bring it about and to really get into it.
Good. Yeah. And that's a great place to be, to start. Right. And I think, I went in initially for healing, but mostly just because I felt super safe. Right. And I was curious about it. And I just felt like the timing of it was so divine that I couldn't pass it up. Yeah. And so when I sat, it was amazing. And then, like I said, a lot of time went by afterwards. I just started living, back to that head down, like steps forward, kind of just living life, but still feeling a little bit like, what am I doing here? Why am I here?
Yeah.
And so I got the call to go back to that space in 2018. So about 3 years later, actually to the day in April.
Oh, wow.
And when I sat, it was like, oh my gosh, I'm supposed to be here in this space and in this community. And so I got really involved in the space for a few years. So I was going as much as I could. I was helping out around the space, doing things like this. And to the point that at the end of 2018, I went down to the jungle and I did a 10-day a dieta. So this dieta is a little different because when you go to Peru, perhaps, or wherever, and you sit with the medicine, you might have the opportunity. Yes, you'll work with ayahuasca, but you may work with another plant, and they're not. And so you diet the plant, they call it. So this is a dieta, and I dieted Noyarao, which is a tree or a plant. It's luminescent in nature. Its leaves are luminescent, and it's just of light. And so it's not like psychoactive, and there's no like real component to it like a DMT or ayahuasca. But it's you take in the plant itself, and when you do, it lives with you forever.
Cool.
And you can diet many different types of plants down there.
You get to choose?
For that one, it was part of like the group of us from the community that were going down there. That's what we all knew.
Decided on. Cool.
Yeah, that was like the one that's done. But there's others that people have dieted for different reasons, and each plant has its own constitution and like what it's offering, which is kind of cool. So so that was like, a full year of like sitting with the medicine, and my pure intention for most of it was like, what am I doing? What's the thing that I'm going to feel really giddy up? There you go, Steve, right?
Yes, love it. Love it.
About that I can show up to authentically, genuinely. And let's face it, like we live in this world, I have to earn an income. Like I have to earn money.
Right.
So I couldn't like put those two things together. I just couldn't figure out what I despised the word work before. Because it always felt icky to me, It just felt like, work. Like I want to play, right?
Right.
And so I struggled with it until it wasn't even in a ceremony or in a vision in the medicine, right, that this happened. It was in conversation afterwards. And I heard someone talking about this book called How to Change Your Mind by Michael Pollan, right?
Michael Pollan, yep.
And to this day, I have to admit, I have not read the book, but the book has changed my life.
I love it. I love when things happen like that sometimes. And
it's so funny. I knew when I heard that book existed, that psychedelic-assisted therapy was on the horizon.
Yeah.
And I knew that was the thing, that I could blend my passion and what I wanted to wake up for and build a career around.
Yes.
So I have not sat with ayahuasca since 2019.
I love it.
I found my answer. I actually enrolled for my master's program for that fall, right? So I started in the fall of 2019, and I graduated last spring. So I did 3 years of my master's.
That's a giddy up.
Yeah. And I've just been on this path of moving forward towards this thing that I found with, grandmother years ago. And it's still a few years out, right? So technically this therapy doesn't wholly exist. There's still a lot of science being formed and developed, and we're creating it. But I know in my heart of hearts that this will exist by the time I'm like I'm there.
Yeah. This is incredible. Like, because like we're on parallel journeys, just in like a lot different of a way, a different of the way that we're trying to, get this to people and have them understand this. And like, that's who I sit across from every single time I do one of these shows is pioneers, people who are pioneering new space. And that's like, it's exactly what you're doing. It's incredible because people need to know about this, and the fact that you were able to have that hindsight and to say like, this is what I need to do to be ready, like an entire career, and because sometimes people look at me and I talk and they say, well, why did you, when I say I moved to Maine so I could, that was the easiest, lowest barriers of entry to get into the cannabis market. That was great. The real reason I went to Maine was because legislation is being put forth there where psilocybin can be something that is going to be, is going to happen. It's going to happen in the next couple of years in Maine. It's already happening, 109 in Oregon and Colorado and all these places, and it's going to happen here. So it's like I was called to this and I just did it. I made, so you make these decisions in your life that a lot of people, they might look at it like, this is kind of crazy, it's kind of out there, for sure. I mean, I'm a pharmacist. That's my training. So it's kind of goes against like everything that that I've been told and everything that I've been taught, and everyone who's in my profession is like looking at me right now. And maybe not, maybe this is just Steve feeling this way, but like, seeing like what's, and 3 years ago, they would have been like, there would have been, maybe the crucifix would have been out the door, waiting for me. But now people are curious, so like people are reaching out to me like all the time and talking about this, people who are, I didn't think would ever be able to have a conversation about this. So like the fact that you had this hindsight and this I think probably because we already know it's very intuitive. You already knew it was going to happen because you had sat with, ayahuasca, and you had your plan. You knew what was going to make you whole. You knew what, you were figuring it out.
Right. I was figuring it out. It's interesting. And to your point, so the reason why, yes, for me personally, right. So like, we're all on this personal journey. It made a lot of sense. But the other reason is because I knew the way that I was experiencing the medicine was very unique. Right. And of course, more people can do it in the way that I did. Right. So I felt really lucky, like I said, that I had someone come into my space who was really knowledgeable, who was helpful in guiding and supporting me to bring me into a community that was like really a safe container for doing this medicine work. That's not available to everybody. That is really difficult sometimes to have that level of like safety in these medicine spaces. And so what I saw with the psychedelics moving more towards mainstream is that more people would have access to them in a safe way. So more people in the general public and just general conversations would be able to maybe speak to even their physicians about this, to speak to each other about this, that it's not taboo or it's not like, scary or this weird, thing, but rather it's a very scientific-based way of healing, right? Way of working through some of your stuff that you could do down the street, know? So that was what was appealing. It was bringing in this wisdom and this ancient medicine into in a modern way so that it was accessible to the masses.
Yeah. I think that's our job, is to steward that appropriately, to steward the medicine appropriately, because that's what I get really nervous about is that,
that's right.
Yeah, it's you went through this, this period of intention where you met this person and then you learned about ayahuasca and you learned about the journey, and this is, probably some time. I don't know how long you were doing this before, beforehand, before you sat with her, but you were doing this, and as well, like, you had this community around you who had been doing it and had been, had understood the ancient techniques and the ancient traditions and the dieta and all this stuff that's so important, the integration afterwards, all of it. I get really nervous that the pharmaceutical companies are going to come around and they're going to get their hands on this and just make it a system where it's very, very streamlined and it's not necessarily safe for people, or not necessarily. I mean, they'll make it safe because they'll have to, but it won't be getting the intended benefits because they're changing it, and that stuff's kind of being lost.
Yeah, I guess that's still a blind spot in the evolution and the revolution of psychedelics is the exact way that it will be rolled out, because they haven't gotten there yet. Ketamine is really the only psychedelic that's fully legal in that way. Other than that, psilocybin, even MDMA, though it's not technically a psychedelic, still in that kind of category classification, isn't there yet, right? The trials are still happening, so we don't know exactly what it's going to look like. Only that it will happen.
Yeah,
we
right.
do not. It would be hard to stop this train at this point and put the genie back in the bottle.
I think it's impossible at this point, honestly. Like, there's too many people who know about it, and there's too many people who have already seen benefit from it. And, the people who listen to this conversation and they hear somebody who, I tried this in 2015 and then 2018, and then this, changed my life to the point where I'm doing this for a living, and it's not something that I need to do all the time. It's not like, that, and that's the beauty in it. That I think once people see that, they're gonna, more and more will keep opening their mind, and like that's why I'm doing the show.
Right. And, this conversation does re-inspire my passion for psychedelic assisted therapy. And I have to admit that through my last 4 years of going on this therapy journey, I'm really just content with becoming a therapist over the last few years. And so in some of my mind, I'm like, oh, if I never become a psychedelic assisted therapist, I am like, it got me to this place, which is just as enriching as potential for that. So I feel so grateful. And, I also believe that when we start to work with medicines, it sometimes does feel like we're supposed to work with medicine, right? So it can feel like, oh, this is what I'm supposed to be doing now. I'm supposed to be somehow in this world. And I don't think that's always the case. And we have to be very careful of that, because we still need like plumbers and politicians and teachers and these other positions, but who are just as healed and who maybe have these psychedelic experiences or relationship to the plants, but are still just doing, not jobs directly with the medicines. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, well, 100%. Yeah, we need people people around who are taking the medicine and having these experiences and then taking it out into the world and being the best possible politician that they can be, because they've opened up their mind and they say, holy shit, look at all this, like especially the politicians. That would be the greatest thing ever, is if I could do a BeeWell summit and I could get every single politician, all 2,000 of them, the big wig politicians in Washington and the governors and all of them. And I brought them to a BeeWell sanctuary, and we got to hang out for 2 weeks and, do some ayahuasca, do some mushrooms, do some meditation, give each other some hugs. Like that would open up everybody's consciousness, and people would hopefully, maybe it would be really bad and people would then, go in a different direction. But I think that it would open people up. And, when you bring people together and you allow them to open up their minds, only good things happen.
Yeah. It's funny. So we'd have a lot of integration circles or chatting. And when I was really invested in the community, and you don't know how many times I have heard, this politician needs to do this, like a specific one, or just politicians in general. It is like one of the most common things of like, if we could have anybody sit with the medicine, it would be those policymakers, lawmakers, people who are like in those positions. Because
they're making the decisions for us, and they're making things a lot harder. And like the way that they, and I'm not saying this for everybody, but like, right now it just seems like everyone has an agenda for themselves or for the group that they're a part of, and no one's actually caring about the 99% of the people who actually exist out here and who are, who need so much help, who just went through so much trauma with the pandemic, and they're still going through so much trauma with everything that's happening every single day, with all this information that's being put in front of them constantly. Like, people need a break. They need help.
Yeah. They just need support, different options, right?
Yeah, support, exactly, right. Different options, support. That's really what it is. Like, because I believe, like I said, the human body is so resilient, and the species is so resilient. Like, we're gonna be here, but like we need to start healing and become a more connected community.
Yeah, and to know that that's safe and that's okay to do, and that there's ways to do it. And to follow that little like maybe curiosity, right? Or that thing that might want you to try something different or step out of your comfort zone. Like we started this, is like, that's there for a reason, and all of us have a unique life path or experience. That's what makes it so interesting, is those nudges or curiosities are ours, like we get to have those. And we should listen to that, whether we call it intuition or what, but we get stuck in the cultural pressures of like doing versus really listening or just being. And some of the medicine work or the healing, shall we say, helps us like switch that just helps balance that out. Yeah, we have to, that's part of our culture, right? That's part of who we are. And it's not inherently wrong. It's just when it's out of balance and we're stopped listening and we're stopped following our curiosity too.
Yeah, I think you had said it to me once, is that it just helps, soften the ego a little bit. And that by doing so, I think that opens up the curiosity, because the ego is there to protect us. And so, of course, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is just how I'm posturing it. The ego is there to protect us. And but sometimes we gotta let it know that hey, we gotta soften a little bit, because that's the only way that we'll be able to expand and grow in this way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so, who is the we? Who's letting the ego know?
Right. Yeah. Right. That's me. Right. It's me who's letting the ego know, and it's
like a higher self.
Yeah, I think
that higher version.
The higher version. Yeah, the higher the spirituality. It's like you have this higher version of myself, because the ego is just one part of me, right? Or the one part of us. And there's maybe it's not a higher version. I don't know if it's higher, but it's another version. It's another
version. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, another part.
But not your ego.
But not my ego. Right. It's definitely not the ego.
Yeah. And so we're distinguishing between those two voices, or the ways those nudges or feelings, or however we intuit or feel, what is leading me here? Am I being led by ego or something else? Or am I being led by, so maybe we call it heart and brain? That's a good distinction.
Heart and brain, yeah.
Right? Like a way to kind of help tease those things apart, because it can feel confusing if it's like, ego's telling me this, but I'm saying this. It's like, wait, well, who am I then? And
that, it's really challenging, because with this, this is something that I'm really putting myself out there, and my ego sometimes is gets in the way and says, makes me nervous, wants to keep me safe, and says, well, why are you doing this, dude? Is this really what you should be spending your time on? Should we be doing this? And then the other part of me that knows what I should be doing, the heart. Yeah, dummy. This is exactly what you need to be doing, actually, not what it has nothing to do with even a want. This is where you have to be.
Right. And so it's like coming back into your heart in a very gentle way. And that's where the breath comes in. It's just like the remembrance, right? So it's almost like you forget for a moment, you forget that why or that reasoning that is from the heart. And so sometimes that feels good to place your hand on your heart and just settle into that space to hear or be reminded of those truths, right? Those deeper truths, because this keeping you safe is true too, right? There's a truth to that. It's just an old truth, and just a truth that's been outdated. It's just a little bit young. It's like an immature truth.
Yeah, it's an immature truth that is definitely, it's not serving you any, that truth isn't serving you any longer.
Yeah. And you've outgrown it. You've grown into this heart-centered truth that is more real and alive, and it has more juice in it. And it's I want to operate from that level of who I am.
Yeah. And you're a huge inspiration, because finding a way to, to make that into a career, because that's that is a necessary thing that our culture is, we are a do culture, and we do need to, produce income. That's a real thing. So and a lot of times people say you don't need to, you can just make money, and then you can do what your heart desires on the other side. And it's maybe that's for some people.
If you get there.
Yeah, if you can get there, for sure. Exactly right. I think a lot of times people are going to get lost in that.
Yeah, you could. I mean, not to be grim, but no one's guaranteed any day or any time. So if you're waiting until you're retired to live, I mean, you might not get there.
Right. Yeah, you might not. And that's, it's a real case. It's people always put this stuff off, their whole lives. And it's even more challenging when you start to have kids, because you think I got to be doing for them and making sure that they're provided for. But if I'm not whole, then I'm going to be some shit parent. I'm not going to be present in this person's life. I'm not going to. So I need to follow my heart, and I need to make that my career and figure out the best way to do that.
Yeah. And isn't that what you really want for your children?
Yeah, it's exactly what I want for my children. Like, I want them to see, like, hey, Dad. My dad was a pharmacist who wasn't happy with what he was doing, just because that was a path he chose. He didn't really know what he wanted to do, and he made a decision when he was 18 years old, and he got here. But then he realized that that's not what he wanted to do. It didn't make him happy going to work. He actively felt like he was making people sicker, and he didn't. That's the opposite of who he wanted to be. So he took the bull by the horns, and he figured out how to lead from his heart, and then created his whole life up, from that.
Right. And to say, like, the lessons that you did learn and you're able to take with you from being a pharmacist into this new evolution of who you are. You get to still extract that experience and how it shows up in what you're doing now.
Yeah, and we wouldn't be here if I didn't have that experience, which is so fucking cool too, because like you said, I can get so mad and so angry, right? And so
serves a purpose.
It serves a purpose. It was my path is my path, and I need to be comfortable with that. And if I want to change that path, I can do it tomorrow.
Absolutely. And now that you have done it, you have the experience of knowing that you can do it. So you might have still some resistance because it might feel a little different and new, but you at least now can look in your own memory bank and be like, well, I did it when I was a pharmacist, and now I changed. And if I need to change again, well, I can. Right.
Exactly. Being adaptable. And that's probably what's so cool about our species, is that we are so adaptable.
Mm-hmm.
And like, you said a cool thing earlier, like, you said we can't do this yet.
Yeah.
Like the
that's
brain.
my favorite word.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Because like yet, we're going to keep, getting better. The brain is going to keep, I can't imagine what the brain's going to be like in 100 years and what we're going to be capable of now that we're being exposed to all this stuff and our processing speed and how much it's going to be wild.
Right. And so what this stuff and some of what the medicine does in our brain chemistry is we have like neuroplasticity, or we have this area of the brain of gray matter that we can rewire or learn. Because when we talked about attachment theory earlier, when we're very young, that is when the brain is hardwiring, right? So hardware, if you want to, I'm not really good with technology, but like that's like the most important time. We're very malleable. We're very porous. Our brains are just like picking up, and we're firing those neuron pathways. And every stage and age as we develop, it kind of gets a little more settled, quote unquote, in our ways, right? We kind of become. But even still, there's neuroplasticity, or there's gray matter in our brain that no matter how old or the age of the brain exists, it could be a little more challenging to get to. And what potential for these psychedelics does is it expands us into that part of the brain. So it shuts down the default mode network, and we might be able to access some of the potential for wiring and connecting in new ways, in different ways. And then when we get out of the experience, that's when integration plays in, is how do we then try to keep those neuroconnectors alive and well and going forward into not just having this mystical experience and this beautiful, potential beautiful experience. And then it just is like right back into, the old patterns or the ways of being. How do we keep that, going?
Yeah. And so like what, you did this for quite a while. So like, could you speak to that on some of the principles or practices of integration?
Yeah.
Like what, because I agree. This is really what the giddy up is. You have this experience. It's fucking incredible. And then you need to figure out how to make that your life. And like, that's not always easy. And so like integration is probably the biggest piece.
Me too. And I hear it very high touch in terms of like it being like a word, and like it layers over conversations, but I don't hear people speak to specifics to it too often, which is so interesting. It feels like a gatekeeper or like a withholder sometimes. And people do tend to do that. I don't know if it's a power thing or not, but I think integration could look different for everyone, but I do think it's this first. And as we talked about, it's connecting with another person about your experience so that you feel like you're in a trusted environment with a human who generally what the rollout for these therapies is going to look like is some sessions beforehand with your therapist. And that's going to be the mindset, and that's going to be your intentions, and that's going to be the preparation stage. And all of the things, if it's dieta, if it's whatever it comes through, why are you doing this? Get really crystal clear about your why. And through that process, you're developing the relationship with your therapist, which is, let's face it, every relationship is everything. So you want to have a nice, strong, trusted relationship no matter what you're doing inside of therapy. And then you have your experience, right? And your therapist is there with you during that. And then you have the after, or the integration after. And so that's going to be possible talking, right? So that could be talking about it. It could be journaling about it. And with the talking, right, you're going to come up with what you saw that you might have needed, like the behavioral changes that you thought through your ceremony or journey was shown to you, right? So that's going to be, you're going to speak to that, right? You're going to talk about it. You're going to let others in on that. And then maybe come up with a plan as to how. But you keep it alive to the best of your ability.
So it's all about the ceremony. It's all about going back. So with integration, because sometimes when, like, me as a non-trained professional, for me, integration, I do psilocybin. I haven't done ayahuasca, but I'll do psilocybin. I have my intent. I have my set, and then it might be a situation where I'm going to go dance, to take it and to go then dance and express myself there. Or it might be I'm going to take it and then go do yoga, and I'm going to sit with myself, and I'm going to meditate afterwards and figure that. A lot of the times I have the experience, and then I use that experience to, I don't necessarily always like go back and draw on the experience in the way that I was feeling, but I know that because it allowed me, it gave me clarity, that I guess I'm trusting the process. But I think maybe I should be going back and thinking about their journaling on the experience a little bit more. And is that what you're saying?
And so journaling is another key part to that, So, yeah, I mean, I think it could be and this is the other interesting piece, is as long as there's something reflective, and it doesn't necessarily have to be like a conversation, because sometimes words are difficult to find with the journey. But there's something reflective, like integration is something about, it could be art too. Some people talk about not just like writing with paper and pen, but like drawing something, creating something. It doesn't have to be a drawing, just like something artistic. So we live in a very symbolic world, right? So there's symbolism everywhere. And so if we found something symbolic in our journey, we can kind of materialize that. So if it was a bee, right? And it was like we had some message from a bee or something, I don't know, I'm randomly making this up, right? So how can we bring that energy of the bee? Do we get a little bee statue and we put it somewhere, and that could be like integration. So it's a reminder, right? So how are we reminding ourselves of the clarity that we found during the journey, so that we don't have to run back to the journey to get that clarity again? Yeah, that's what it is. And I don't find myself running back to the, to the journey for clarity, but there comes a point where in my my year, I get to a point I say, things are fuzzy. Things are fuzzy. I could use I could use a ceremony for myself. Yeah. And in that case, then I take the right time to, to set it up and to get it going. Yeah. But I think that if I do more of what you're saying, and I reflect back on the journey by actually like putting pen to paper, or, talking to somebody about it specifically, like I talk about it all the time, like on this show and on, with people daily, but I don't necessarily go back to my direct experience. I'm just talking about it in general. Right. So I think that, doing that, integrating, like, that's what's really important, is integrating the experience into how you experienced it, and then going forth in your life. Right. Going forth with new knowledge potential, which is, when we know better, we do better, right? So if we know better, we might do different. So that's the hope of it. And I have to say that with the plants, my other strong belief is that, how do I want to phrase this exactly? You specifically, Steve, as many times as you get called back to psilocybin is perfect. So I don't really judge people's usage at all, because I just think it's a little different than, like, pharmaceuticals are more like prescription based, and like someone has to tell you how much to take, when to take it, all of those things. And I do believe that the energy of the spirit of the plants is an ally for each individual. And you build a relationship with that plant in and of itself. And through that relationship, you will know how much and how often and when and where, and the dosage. And that develops as any relationship develops. And I or nobody professionally can take that away from you. And I really believe that, because we don't technically need this whole circus of whatever Western way of doing plants. If you can pick the mushroom outside and take it, right? So like, you don't need anyone to tell you how to do it or not do it.
Yeah, I've never needed. That's the thing, is I've never needed anybody to tell me how to do it. I was super afraid to get into this. I was super, I had a past, with other substances that was, that made me very worried about, this is something that I don't know, is this something that I can do? I don't know, so I had to, like, but I was being called. I was being called to it. I was being called to it, and I was always nervous about it because of what you hear and all the stigma, everything that's stigmatized about it. Yes, and I was being called. I was being called to it, and I found that like through this, I'm figuring out the protocols and stuff that I need for myself, and if you're intuitive enough, your body tells you, and it's like this is how I get so excited about it, was because I was a person who believed, and a person anecdotally who, you needed to take the medicine every day for it to work. Like, that's how medicine works to me, and it's like the fact that I would be called to this and I would take it, and then 4 months later, I'd still be having these positive, giddy effects from it, and still be talking positively about how it's positively affecting my life, because it's making me prioritize yoga and making me prioritize myself, making me prioritize the work that I want to be doing, as well as making me be present for my family and for my friends. Like, that's how I knew, and it was like, this was such a very, very delicate situation for me. Now to the point where even now, where I'm out here talking about it, and being a pioneer for it, being an advocate for it, like, that's, the stills in the back of my head makes me worried that, about for the way people will perceive it. But I know internally, it's the medicine, and it is so good, and it needs to be here, and I don't give a shit. I don't care. I could care less, and I need to push forward the part of myself that knows that what you're saying is 100%
and
true.
I think at any conversation that I've listened to that has to do with psychedelics, this point that I'm about to say always comes up. And it's that it's not for everybody. It does, just because it is an incredible and cool thing, and we're promoting it, and we believe in it, and it's our path and journey, and it's not for everyone, and that's okay too, and so I feel like that always needs to be made mention, that this isn't a silver bullet, and I don't think like every human well, it's okay, let's put it this way. I followed Terrence McKenna for a long time. That's how I got my information on psilocybin.
Yeah.
He was the GOAT. He's the OG of psilocybin. And so I listened to him. That's how I learned how to take it. And he said, it would be a shame if you get through this entire existence without, exploring your consciousness through psychedelics and without having sex. If you didn't do those two things while the whole time you were alive, you might have missed out on a couple of things. So I don't know. I just kind of...
With that being said, Rebecca and Steve very much so feel that way. Like, if you should, this is how, you should be experiencing life this way, at least a little bit. But
it's not for everyone.
And it's not for everybody. And we understand that.
We understand that. So I'm kind of being playful around that stuff, because I on a serious note, no, it's not for everyone. And like, it's, if you feel that nudge, that calling, that little pull, that tilt of the head, what is that? Maybe you should move towards it. It might be something worthwhile to discover.
Yeah, exactly. Or, it's, if you're somebody who's a little bit nervous like I was, and somebody who needs help, somebody who's, literally needs help because they're struggling in their life, like, let's talk about this. And don't go out there, don't go out right now and do ayahuasca, and don't go get mushrooms right now. We're not saying that. No. But we're saying, start to, maybe this is something that you could also do. That's something that might be helpful for you, that might help you understand some of your trauma, so that you can help heal yourself, and you won't have to experience some of the, the negative feelings, or the, the negative experiences that you're bringing upon yourself.
Right. I mean, like I said, if I didn't have the person living with me, staying with me, like completely showing me the way and helping me along those decisions with it, I would never recommend that someone's like, okay, just going to drop everything and go and do it. That's not the mindset, right? The preparation is so important in this. It's not a knee-jerk decision by any means. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. It's before I, decided that I was going to, bring this and, bring psilocybin into my life and have that be a part of my life. Like, there was a good year and a half, thinking and of, is this the right thing for me? Research and all this. I'm not saying that everyone needs to take that amount of time. That was right for me. Now it's been integrated into my life, and it's helped me, I started a podcast because how much it's helped me, and that's the thing is it's actually probably helped me start the podcast because I've been talking about this podcast before podcasts were cool.
Yeah.
Like, 5-6 years ago, I was like, dude, this podcast thing, like, this is going to blow up. This is going to be awesome. Of course, I waited till like everybody has a podcast before I launched mine, but that's my journey, and
right.
Yeah, and that's
Totally.
Yeah, and I wouldn't have got here. I wouldn't have got here if it wasn't for the for the psilocybin helping me understand that.
Yeah, right. And so like you needed it. It's all the way it's supposed to be. Truly, like it just is.
It just is exactly. And now, are you going to? With psilocybin, it's something that is going to be coming, in Maine. And I think that's one of the modalities that will be, earlier on that we'll be able to explore, at least in this country. So I know you're going to a conference, right? Like
right. Yeah, that's right. I'm heading out to Denver, Colorado in June. They're having the psychedelic science conference. So that it's a big yearly conference out there for a week, and they'll have all kinds of different speakers and information on what the trajectory of this psychedelics into the medical model will look like. And with that said, let me say as well, like, for me to feel totally comfortable in that space of support that I think is the level needed for individuals, I'm going through I went through a 3-year master program. I go through 2 years before I can get licensed. Once I'm licensed, I'll go through even more training specific to psychedelic assisted therapy. So it'll be like, probably a few more years before I am prepared myself to be that person. And I will be taking with me my own psychedelic experiences. So I'll have a real life experience with it. It's not like I'm a therapist who sees like this new cool thing and just going to study the research and just going to look at get trained in it without ever having a psychedelic experience, right? So I think I bring both of those, which to me is what's needed to fully support someone in their process as well.
I'm probably not going to go to a therapist who's
hasn't
come on,
ingested it.
It's like buying cannabis from a guy who has never smoked cannabis or done cannabis in his life. It just it doesn't make sense,
right?
It's like I guess maybe like you said, maybe there's that subset of people. But if you're somebody who's like you who wants to get into it, you need to have an understanding of how the medicine works before you can put it onto anybody else.
Right.
So I think I'm pretty like.
For your embodied, for yourself, how it works, because we can understand how it works through all the studies and the brains and the articles and people research, and all of that is beautiful, and I'm doing that as well. And my felt sense experience has felt it. I know what it's like. My
6 years of pharmacy school, and postdoc training after that never would have prepared me to talk to people about psilocybin. I needed to do it first before I could have the educated, conversations with people about it for sure.
Yeah. And I'm looking forward to those trainings, those specific trainings. Like we talked about preparation, integration. Technically, what I'm speaking to is only my own, research. I still haven't done the traditional training yet. I'm pretty sure I have to be licensed first. So I'm on this track. I feel like a tortoise, like the podcast, everyone's doing it. It feels like everyone's doing it. And I just see people blowing by me on this hair track. And I'm just I'm getting there. I have my own time.
Yeah, I think you're getting there. And I think you're taking the best possible route because some people who are just blowing by there, I'm going to tell you one thing, I'm going to definitely talk to you about this afterwards, about how we're going to get me set up so we can, talk to you more and figure that out. So when, I'm one of your patients when this becomes a thing for you.
Oh, wow, cool.
Yeah, that's how much I think, that's how great I think that the journey that you're taking and somebody who's just blowing by you, that's just what, maybe that's their path. Sure. Right. Maybe they've been doing it, but I don't know. But maybe that's also them just blowing by you because we live in a capitalistic society and they see the huge opportunity that's going to be that's what makes me nervous. It is a huge opportunity that's in front of us. A lot of money is going to, come from this. And we know what happens when that's the case.
Yeah, and it has the potential for destruction when there's greed or money or things like that. Yeah, it could backfire. Hopefully, there's enough intention and like people like you said that are advocating from the heart that will keep that alive.
Yeah, advocating from the heart, that'll keep that alive. And like we've seen that with cannabis, you know. So for the most part, you know, at least here in Maine and you know, nationally as well too. You know, it's not controlled by some big pharmaceutical company. You know, there's tons of these, you know, small businesses that are still flourishing from it. But this has to be protected, and it has to be protected through the heart by people who are pushing it forward that way.
Right. And I you know, you like to think that that's happening from what I've heard so far. And I guess the rest is like wait and see, right?
Right. Yeah, exactly. So the conference, I think that's going to be so awesome.
Right.
Yeah. That's a map. Is it a MAPS conference?
Yeah. MAPS is a big part of it. I think there's a couple other key players there, but MAPS is obviously like so incredible in this space right now.
Multidisciplinary Association of Psychedelic Studies.
Yeah.
So that's what it is, right? Yeah. Definitely a giddy up. Definitely people who've been doing the work for a long time.
Totally. And so like before there were trainings, people would just download their manual. So they have this a public manual on their website. Anyone can download it, by the way, if you're ever interested. And
we'll throw up a link.
Yeah, it's their protocol for sitting with people, like their training, like so MDMA is their specific one they've been working with extensively and so they're in like trial 3 or they're very close to being rolled out with MDMA. And so their manual on how to, you know, like preparation and sitting with the client and then integration is all on their website. You know, Johns Hopkins is doing a lot of research with psilocybin. Also out in the UK, there's a couple of places there that are doing psilocybin as well. And just, yeah, like the studies are incredible and what they're showing for it all.
Oh my Lord. Like, absolutely incredible. Like we're seeing, like, you know, an SSRI, traditional antidepressant, traditional anti-anxiety med, like end outcomes, we're seeing either non-inferiority or like we're seeing like a 3 to 4% increase in end outcome. Like psilocybin, we're seeing 50, 60%, yeah, you know, decreases in end outcomes. Like it's absolutely incredible, the early stuff that we've seen. And that's why it's taking people by such storm. It's why, you know, How to Change Your Mind, you know, the book that you were talking about, you know, blew everything up and kind of lets people know this is actually mainstream now. We can actually be having these conversations, and we should be having these conversations.
Because the results are so great. And it was interesting. I was talking to a client yesterday, and we talked about these percentages, and because she was like, something along the lines like, something didn't quite work for her. So I'm going to say that. And, I said, we're talking, I said, listen, this is a statistical game though, because we're saying it's incredible because at 3 to 4% for the SSRIs, that's 3 to 4%. We're talking 40 to 50%. Wow. Look at that gain. That's incredible. With that 50, whatever that percentage is, there's 40 to 50 people that aren't receiving those results.
Right.
So just remember, this is why it's not a silver bullet.
Not a silver bullet.
Why it's not for everyone. Yes, the percentages from what we have currently are so much better, and it's not a guarantee. It doesn't mean that you're going to go and do this and it's going to save everything. It's just the potential of that is so much more, and we're speaking to the potential of it versus it being the only thing.
Yeah, and the potential of it. And like the more we learn, maybe we'll be able to convert and turn that percentage into 40 to 50. Maybe that percentage is really like 60 or 70. Who knows? But there's definitely a subset of the population who won't see benefit from this or, you know, doesn't necessarily. And that might mean that they don't need it at that current time, or they're not, you know, this is how we're talking about it as a medicine. Right. Those other 30% of people, it might help them in their lives. It might help them improve their lives. This is just like in showing end outcomes on that. Yeah. So there could be other applications for it as well, which is it's just so, you know, so great.
It's definitely worth the risk, right? Like or if there's not much risk, I should say.
That is the giddy up. Yeah. That's the giddy up right there. Is there's not much risk. Right. And before everyone think am I going to lose my mind? Am I going to trip forever? Am I going to be in a hospital? Am I going to be in a psych ward? Because that's what was being thrown at us. You know, that propaganda. Like, no, it's very safe as long as you are doing it, in a setting like Rebecca is talking about, like, you know, like we've talked about in the show, where you have professionals or you have, you know, friends, or you have an understanding of it yourself. You've done the research yourself, and you know that you can sit with the plant. You know, that's what needs to be done. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Yeah.
Cool. So I have a couple questions for you. You know, I know we've been at it for quite some time now.
Yeah. Okay.
But so the I would love to have you come back on the show after you go to that conference.
Yeah.
And to come and share some stuff with us about what you learned. And
sure.
I think that would be great. I'd love to have you on as like a regular guest, like,
wonderful.
You know, therapy with Rebecca. Like, you know, I think that would be great.
That's funny. Yeah.
Steve gets his little therapy sessions,
right?
And, you know, while we're doing the podcast.
Totally.
And I would love to chat about, you know, doing this kind of as like a series, you know, on the show. I've never done ayahuasca. I know that I'm ready to sit with it. So if you could maybe put me in touch with your community and we could get the ball rolling on that. And if everybody involved was comfortable with me, you know, talking about it and going through that experience and kind of documenting it for people, you know, how I feel beforehand. Hey man, I'm 2 weeks out. This is where I'm at. You know, now I've done it. Now we're integrating, and I can talk about the experience. I think that people will have there'll be a lot of benefit for that to show the listeners.
Yeah, totally. And that's what I was telling you, my friend was doing at the time. Like she was just popping a camera in front of her and she had this YouTube channel. And it was like one of the only channels out there at that time that was talking about her. She was just talking about her experience with ayahuasca. And so, and because she just got a lot of traction. And so basically that's what I hear you say that you would do. And as far as like, you know, we can talk more about this after too. I mean, this is a very highly, private thing for people. Like it's always like, you know, as long as no specific names are being said, like obviously things like that are, then you can do whatever you want with it. Right.
Well, and that's the thing is you got to respect everybody's privacy and you got to respect where everybody's at and you know, where they're at with it 100%. I haven't found somebody who I've been comfortable enough to ask that question to yet, that to say, hey, will you help lead me on this journey? And will you help, you know, I haven't, but I was hoping that maybe, you know, after we had this conversation that it would be with you. Yeah. Because I've met tons of people who have said, oh, ayahuasca, I can hook you up. I'll get you this or that, you know, and it's like, well, maybe, you know, I got to figure this out. Let's, well, how are you guys doing it? How is your community doing? And some of those communities have been great. And some of them have, you know, presented me some really cool options and stuff, but I just haven't, Steve wasn't ready. Now I'm feeling like I'm there, and I think you're a really awesome person who I'm super, you know, comfortable with already. I feel like we've known each other for forever.
I love that feeling.
It's a giddy up. And so let's, you know, if we could, you know, let's make that happen, and let's make it a series for the show for the listeners to just like you said, to show them your friend was doing it, and I think that's so cool. And if I can show them that my experience, it's not this big bad thing. It's actually this beautiful ceremony that can be super effective to the point where it helps change your life and gives you direction on where you want to be.
It can certainly do that.
Yeah.
It can do a lot of things. So that'll be nice to hear too, because it's just so unique. It's so unique. And that it gave me this, and it gave me a lot of other things as well. But I think this was the most like tangible, potent, like grounded. I mean, there were other, but like I said, there's so much that opens up when you start to work with, especially DMT. So it'll be exciting to see how that opens up for you. Yeah,
I can't wait to see it, and can't wait to just, you know, talk about it openly on the show and to let people know how we feel and what we think about, you know, like I said, I've never experienced it. I've only had this secondhand knowledge, and I just can't wait to go through it on my own and to show people what it's really all about from my perspective.
Right. Yeah.
Awesome.
It'll be good.
Yeah, it's going to be a giddy up.
Yep, for sure.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Rebecca, for coming on today. You know, I just appreciate it so much. I know you did a lot to get here, you know, making the schedule work, and like that's just absolutely incredible. I cannot wait to have you on again. Everybody, where can everybody find you if they want to reach out?
Well, that's a great question. I am actually a little incognito. I don't really have too many. I do have a social. I have social media. I have an Instagram. I'm not currently on it. I'm taking like a little detox break from it. So I maybe through you. Maybe if anyone, have them reach out to you if they really wanted to get connected. I'm still like. I'm out of my comfort zone even having this conversation a little bit, but it's good for me.
Well, that's good. The only way is through, and this is what we're going to do is, you know, people, you know, if you guys want to have access to Rebecca and what she's doing, then you guys just reach out to us, you know, through Dr. BeeWell, and we will set that up, and it's going to be great. I can't wait to see, you know, to follow along, you know, to see where your journey leads you and leads us.
Me too.
Giddy up.
All right,
everybody. Thank you so much. Everybody, be well.
Bye.